I'm Mick, and a lot of familiar and friendly faces out there in the audience. So thank you very much, folks, for making your time available this morning to come and hear what my take on the solution was. And you're going to hear from more of the engine room of what really happened on how we delivered what Kelly's talking about. I won't be too technical and for the time that we have available. And if you do want to know details and other things, then certainly ask me afterwards, and I'm more than happy to share with you. So I've got some demos, and it's all running from a 4G box under the desk over here. So if I kick it or if it does something, then you'll all know. So nothing like living precariously. So what I wanted to do was just talk to you a little bit about bringing it all together. So looking at, you've heard a bit about the cloud and what it can offer for you. But I'd like to sort of start back from the beginning and basically say, well, here's what you might have. Here's a solution that you might have on premise, what you use, what you're existing today, and what can we do? Where can we go with this? And in terms of integration and the solution, it's all about using that right tool for the job. Okay. So integration in my world is very important. How to connect. And hopefully you realize that there is a formal need for integration in your organization, whatever that may look like, whatever shape, form. I do go into many partners and many customers and basically see 183 different systems connected point to point, and wondering why, when something fails, it takes a day to go through and try and troubleshoot that sort of landscape. So what we're all about is having a solution that we can configure rather than having a solution that we must write thousands of lines of code for. So I have a demo that I'd like to show you, which sort of goes from very, very basic through and incorporates a lot of different features, such as Office 365, and also how to make that connection. How do we make that connection to the cloud? And that's sort of one of the areas that I'm really interested in personally, that what is the best way on how to do that? Do I have to lift everything up and move it over somewhere that I don't really know, touch, see, or smell? Or is the story a very different scenario than that? And I think you'll be surprised with that. And I'll talk a little bit about the dental corporation solution and what we did there, and how it all sort of hangs together and comes back to deliver Kelly her numbers, which are all very important. So we're now going to walk the walk, and hopefully not like this. All right, it's a little favourite of mine. Where one more time. You can never watch that too many times, really, can you? All right. We've all done that from time to time, and learning is the best policy around this. So it's all about that right tool for the job. And as Kelly mentioned in her speech, in her presentation, that we do need to sit back. We do need to come back from what we're looking at and say, well, is there another way to do this? What else can we bring to the table? What do we know? And often it may be a solution that's from up here. Whereas if we have people of a particular mindset that just come in and they say, I know how to use this particular hammer, and give me a nail to hammer this, so I can use my hammer with. They'll look for all the nails in the problem set, okay, in the solution, and they'll put nails there so they can use their hammer. So it's all about using that right tool for the job. I make one exception, and that is if any of you have played around with a gurney, those little, the water hose blasters, you'll have a path of about 10 metres long that you must gurney, and about 3 hours later you're finally finished because you've got all the cobwebs out and the lights over here are done and everything else. And you're like, well, that 10 metre path turned into sort of a half a day affair. So that's my only exception to that. So in terms of integration, just out of interest, who has integration in their organisation today? Great. Most of us, which is good. I won't ask whether you do it well or not, or how you find it, but there's certainly a definite need for this. And in terms of some of the research and so forth from people like Gartner, they're placing a lot of emphasis on being able to have that integration capability, but not only within your organisation, but also out of your organisation. So as we move forward, there's going to be a lot more offerings from the cloud, and you need to be in a better position to be able to take advantage of that. And how long does each integration, what we call interface, or each connection take? You know, does it take hours? Does it take weeks, days, months? You know, so even today with established integration frameworks and layers, it still takes considerable amount of time in some organisations, where we want to really try and optimise that as much as possible. So probably the most important piece here is that, you know, by 2017, over 2/3 of new integration flows will extend outside the firewall. Okay, so that's something just to think about. So this is a Gartner report and their finding. Do I take this as gospel? No. But certainly it's good to see just where some of the trends are. I keep one eye on this and make sure that we're in a position that we can take advantage of this. So often with integration, what do? What's the best approach? And to be honest with you, a lot of it is trial and error. A lot of it is learnt history, where we know what works, we know what doesn't work. And other parts are the way that you set up your organisation, the structure, that you don't have one particular mindset that, you know, for example, I'm a Java developer, so therefore I'll go off and code everything because that's the way that I know how to do it. And you come back 6 months later wondering why it's taking so long. So the answer to this is relatively easy, okay, in terms of how do we connect up all these emerging technologies. And once again, it's about using the right tool for the job. I suppose one of the corner pieces that we have within our strategy, our integration strategy, is something called BizTalk Server. And this extends out whether it be on-premise or whether it be elsewhere. And I'll get to that later on. But essentially, this is one integration layer that you can go and configure. There's some areas for customization and development, absolutely, because integration isn't as easy as just connecting two wires together, as much as we'd love it to be. So we have capability that basically allows us to connect to things internally and also externally. And in recent times, it's extended up to the cloud and in this, what we call a hybrid type scenario. And that's what I want to demo for you today. Be able to say, well, I'd like to take advantage of what this cloud is, what it has to offer, but I'd also like to take advantage, you know, keep my existing investments with my on-premise systems. And I'd like to be able to tilt that as much or as little as I'd like to, as I see fit. So how much on-premise do we want to use versus how much cloud? And one of the connectivity points between that is something called BizTalk Server. So it allows us to have a formal layer that we can track things, that we know it becomes our first port of call if there's something that goes wrong. Why didn't I receive this invoice? Let's go and have a look and see what our monitoring screens say. So it's not about trying to make everything fit through this one particular layer. It's about having a loosely coupled, being free, but also just being governed, living under the one roof, if you like, so that we can have all that tracking and performance and various other retriability and those sorts of things. So if we then switch over to the cloud, many building blocks. Okay, the cloud, I'm astounded at, you know, for example, Azure, the rapid rate of development evolution. For any of you that sort of keep tabs on this space, it feels like every 3 weeks there's something fundamentally and monumentally new that's coming out. And you know, oh, well, that's something new, that's something new, that's something new. So in terms of the toolkit, it's great because we have all of these other areas that we may want to use as part of our solution. And in terms of integration, this is some of the key pieces that we use. Things like databases, things like networking. We can set up a VPN connection. We can have, you know, a variety of different flavors of databases and storage and so on. So these are all some very useful widgets that we can use in our integration story. But it's all about when to use what, when, and where. So in terms of how do we connect? So a lot of the literature and things like that you may read just says, well, go off and get a cloud solution because it's what the Joneses are doing, and you need to keep up with them. But what does it really mean? So certainly at one level, we can synchronize. So in terms of the connectivity, we can synchronize data between the two worlds if we want, and we can be quite granular. So I could have, for example, orders being done in the cloud, and nightly or every 2 hours, I might synchronize that back down to on-premise, so I can process them on-premise, or I've got a final copy of it for whatever the reason may be. I can also go from my on-premise to the cloud. So I could also say, for example, I've got a bunch of catalog data. I've got some public data that I want to be able to use. Our networks are being flooded. What I'd like to do is daily or nightly move that up to our cloud footprint, and then it all gets serviced from the cloud. So that's one level of connectivity. The next level could be from our application layer. So our messages and web services and those sorts of things. So that I could have my on-premise systems talking nicely to the cloud and the cloud talking nicely to on-premise, okay, at the application level. So some websites, some developers, etc., have gone in and we've gone and tailored that for a particular application. We may have 15 other applications that are running happily as well, but we need to sort of evaluate that on a per application by application basis. And then really the parts that differentiate Azure from the other cloud offerings are the bottom two items there, and that is our VPN connections. So we can actually VPN connect to our cloud footprint. And what that allows us to do then is basically extend out our network, servers, segments, so that you then have full control over that particular space. So you can get access to them just like they're another server on your network. Same IP range. You can basically say what you'd like. It makes all the IT guys really happy about that. And why should I even do that? One of the compelling reasons is that at a moment's notice, as Kelly mentioned, you could spin up a new environment. You could spin up dev, you could spin up UAT, you could spin up pre-production. You might have something for load testing that you want to do. You can spin that up and have it as part of your normal network. Then take it down again when you're finished. If my website's running slow or my application's running slow, I can scale that out in about 5 minutes and then scale it back after the peak period. So these are all some very nice things that we can take advantage of without it being too scary for us from our existing systems. So let me go through to the demo. Okay, so for those of you that haven't seen this is BizTalk Server. And in this particular scenario, I'm just going to explain out an existing on-premise system, which we have something in place today where we go off and it's an inventory replenish system. I got creative a couple of nights ago, you could imagine. And so we get inventory items and messages from our supplier, and we FTP those. We get those via FTP, and they come into our BizTalk area. From that point on, BizTalk will process it and send it into our database. So I'm just going to, so my inventory, I'm just going to up this for a moment. There we go. So what I end up getting is this, just flat file, couple of lines, different items, nothing too prescriptive, and we've just got some paraphernalia that we end up getting. So I'm going to pop that in, and this is basically my supplier's FTP folder. So my on-premise system is going off and grabbing that and doing something with it. While that's taking place, it's always good, I'm just going to show you a little bit behind. The inside, this is BizTalk, and I'm just going to show you one of the things that we might do. And so in terms of what I'm showing you up on the screen at the moment, you can see some coloured lines. Coloured lines are good. There's a blue one, and there's a grid. So our problem space has basically been reduced from a message that's coming from the supplier. We don't care how it arrived, whether it arrived via FTP or Pigeon or Courier or whoever, how it arrived. This is what we need to solve. We need to say, here, we've got some information on the left-hand side. We need to marry it over to what we know. This is going into our inventory database, and that's it on the right-hand side over there. And this is what our database looks like. So from a BizTalk perspective, this is what we build. And I've got a series of other little widgets that I can drop on. And in this case, I've got a little square there that allows me to put a quality rating onto the items as they come through. And I just chose a random number at that point. But for the purpose, we could go off and do a variety of different things. I don't have to worry about the number of commas in those files that we received, the number of lines that we received, whether it's uppercase or lowercase. So this is where we should be looking at, trying to get to that next level up, to say, this is what your integration problems exist. How do I map this from one world to another world? And this is a demo, understood. There is, if you're mapping, for example, EDI documents or SAP documents or healthcare documents, they're a little bit more complex because they've had 20-odd years plus to make them more complex. And this is where that happens, to let you know. It doesn't flow on to all the other parts of the system. It does need to happen in one spot, and typically it takes about half a day to do that. So just to give you some ideas and some time frames. So from that particular point, I have a screen here that known as an orchestration. I know some of you have BizTalk. And in this particular case, I've got the inventory coming in. It's graphical. We're processing it, so we can orchestrate this process, and we can do various functions along the way, so that we do something with it, and then I send it into 2 different locations at the end there. And we can do a variety of different things with this as well. So this is some of the power that BizTalk gives us. So far, we're still dealing with our on-premise system. And just to go into the database table, I actually have those 2 items that have been added in there at the moment. So it's worked, okay? So someone's now come along and said, well, accounts would like to see this. That information that you're moving around, accounts would like to also be able to be part of it. So we can extend out our solution without changing, without bringing the production system down. We can extend this out. And so within our BizTalk world, and I'll come back to the database shortly, but within our BizTalk world, I can create these different endpoints. And remember back to the slide that you saw where we have all those different arrows and connections and so on. This is part of where that is. And I have a variety of different connections that I can make. And we can extend this as well. So that the problem space becomes coming off to a send port, as we call, and I'd like to go off and send it through. Whatever that send port does, I don't care. I don't want to know about it. It might go off to Salesforce. It might go off to Office 365 or wherever it might be. And in this particular case, we're going to accounts. And that's just another folder. And accounts now have actually a slightly different format. So they've got some red writing, they've got some black and some other colors. And so we know this is XML. And I've handpicked some of the elements out of there and then just placed it into this output. So they're only after a subset of what that data is. Okay. So everything's working happily along. What we'd like to do now is to say, well, how can we connect? How can we bring the cloud in to this solution, and what for? So let me just going to move this guy over here. Maybe. There we go. All right. So this particular piece is my Azure management portal, and it allows me, from a UI perspective, to be able to create the widgets and create the things that I need. So over on the left-hand side, I have things like virtual machines. I have websites, and I have a variety of other things that is phenomenal, just far too much to go into in this point in time. One of the areas that I do want to focus on is the fact that I have a database, and I've called it Cloud Store DB. So I've just gone and created a database there. So this is, if you imagine back to that slide, this is the top layer. So I've just gone and set up a database, and we could go off and use that quite happily. Now, my database is identified by a name. It lives on a server. And in fact, I can use my trusty management tool, the SQL Management Studio, to go off and, let me just refresh that. Oh. So I can go off and basically go and manage that database from here. Now, I've done a few things to enable me to do that, such as open up a firewall rule so that my virtual machine running on my laptop can go off and do it. But for all intensive purposes, it's basically it's the same database. It's like a normal SQL database, and I'll just do that. Just wait for that. And there we go. All right. So one of the things that I've done is set up something called a data sync. So without going onto a virtual network or doing anything special, I've gone in and I've configured what we call a SQL data sync. And I'm just going to go back. So what it allows me to do is I've got my local on-premise database, and I've got my cloud databases, in this case my cloud store database, and I'm able to synchronize between the two, and I'm able to pick the fields, I'm able to pick the tables that I'd like to synchronize. So in terms of the synchronization, I have a group, and that defines various elements of my synchronization. So what I'd like to do now, you've seen that we've got 2 inventory items that have been added, and I'm now going to just add another 2. So I'm just going to put that in there now. I just wrote a very scientific tool called Inventory Viewer, and it allows me to just highlight the data that, not very well, there's something I need to work on. highlight the data very well from local, but also I can say go off and get it from the cloud. So that's now connecting to my cloud database and working with it. So eventually, and I've got the sync cycle set to every 5 minutes in this case, so that eventually my cloud database will get my new inventory items and get that replenishment of inventory. So here are the two worlds working quite nicely together from the data sync scenario. And it goes both ways. So that when I'm up in the cloud and I'm doing something in my cloud database, then it'll come back down my way. And what that table is, I've generated orders up in the cloud, and those orders can come down in 5-minute intervals back down to my on-premise system. So what I've got behind my database up in the cloud, so just bringing the databases, the machines together, is I've got a VM running. So I've got this virtual machine. And I've also, this is my personal subscription, I've also got my Minecraft server running, because that keeps obviously the family precious happy. And I've got a website. So here's my website that's basically up in the cloud, and it's running on that VM. This is just an out-of-the-box template that I set up for this particular demo. And I can go through and essentially go and order some things and put an order on. And you guys are more than happy to hit this as well if you like. maxicloud.cloudapp.net, and you can go and place an order on while I'm talking as well if you want. I know it's getting to Christmas and we need to get prepared. So that's sitting behind this particular that particular database, or in front of it. So one of the things that allows me to do is that, for example, we can come along and spin up several, scale and instances and those sorts of things, and take my VM from a small to a large, also my websites and things like that, to go from 1 to 20, if I like. So, we can spin those up quite readily and quite easily. So we get some power and flexibility out of this particular environment. Okay. So another slightly different perspective is if I come back to my BizTalk solution for a moment, I have an endpoint, a service, if you like, that says receive special orders. So I've got my on-premise system, and I would now like to bridge that gap. I would like to expose this out so that, for example, my cloud and other clients and devices can go and access it. But I still maintain my processing here as I normally have done with my existing systems. So from an integration perspective, we needed to add one point in. We needed to say, hey, add this in and start it up. Here's some details and here's some credentials. So we call this Service Bus in Windows Azure. So my Service Bus looks a little bit like this, and there's a name for it which I've called Mix On-Site Connection. It's actually running from my laptop, from a VM, and that's the endpoint to it. So it's hasn't been moved anywhere. It's still running as in an area where I trust, where I know, where I like, and my existing system works. What I'm able to do now is to leverage that from a variety of different places because I have an endpoint in the cloud. So what this particular piece of technology does is make a connection outbound. So I don't need to wait for firewall rules and a whole bunch of other things to come in place. It makes a connection outbound and establishes a connection to the cloud. From that particular point, they will look after the endpoint and say, if there are requests coming to this particular location, send it through to mix system. And that becomes quite important because we can now, I don't have to do anything. I can move this system, which is really important. One day it might outgrow my laptop. I might get more orders in, and I need to move it onto something a little bit more. I don't have to change any of my client behavior. The address that they know to get to me is still the same. And that's, we know if I want to move it to a different data center or a different location, or have 3 servers instead of 1, it's all still the same. So it's all about making things easier for ourselves. So it's known by a particular address, and this is, when I go to that particular address, this is basically what you'll see. And this is really just under the covers a little bit. So I have a service called orders. And this is something coming back from the server that's running on my machine at the moment. So that just happened there and then. Just to show you it's not like those cooking shows and they say 10 minutes in the oven and it looks like this. I'm now going to stop that thing. Whatever that thing was, I'm going to stop my connection to the cloud. So hopefully, I should get an error here. And it basically says, yes, you've got some sort of error. It certainly wasn't high. Now, you'll also notice that my service that was exposed isn't there anymore. Okay? So I'm just going to start that up. And it takes, there's a few other configuration points to this, but happy to go through it with you later. But this is, in my opinion, a very powerful piece to, and there you go, there it is starting up again. So it's a very powerful piece to, what you're doing on premise. And I can add to it a particular parameter, and now I end up getting back some details out of a super secret table that I really didn't want to, move anywhere or do anything with. And that's my particular table here, which is called secret stock. So this is something that's going on internally in my system. I didn't want to basically expose that out anywhere apart from here is a service that comes in, and BizTalk, my framework, is still running it. And we can set this up in a variety of different ways. Lastly, I do want to show you the VPN connection. And just to show you that inventory has, when I clicked on Connect to Cloud, that inventory has gone through and propagated through to the cloud. So within Azure, just to show you, I can come along and define a network. So this is where my things may live in the cloud. This is where my on-premise networks also VPN to. So I have a few different flavors of VPNs that I can use. And IPsec is one of the preferred ones. So it's a solid VPN technology. So all these details are particularly important, and we'll need them from time to time. So what I have done is go in, and I'll just show you that machine. So I want to get to my store that we had a moment ago. But I'd like to get to the machine that the store is running on. And if I click on this particular machine, then I get some details about it. I get some numbers, and I get an internal IP address of this 10.10.1.4. And that'll be important to us in a tech. So what I'd like to do is see if I can get to that machine. And obviously I can't at this point in time. So if I come along and connect, so I've gone off, created a virtual network, and I'm now connecting what we call point to site. So in this particular case, I'm connecting this machine to that network, as well as obviously my corporate network. So I'm now getting a response back. So that machine there is on my network. For those of you that like numbers, I'm getting about 150 millisecond round trip time. So that's not too bad in the grand scheme of things. So I should be able to get to that machine. I can FTP. So let's say I don't have data. Let's say I've got PIC systems. Let's say I've got other types of applications that run off different ports that aren't in web service realm and all nice and neat and everything else. Back-end mainframe systems that a lot of insurance companies have. So we can expose and we can access this securely. So there's some of the important things that we can get out of this. So just coming back, they were all sort of outbound type scenarios. And just coming back to the Dental Corp solution, what we did was look at the inbound scenario. So certainly we used Service Bus within BizTalk, and that exposed our connection points. And then we also used the cloud for some processing along the way so that we could aggregate and do some smarts around the data that was coming through. So it's all about using the best of both worlds. And having a look at what we built, being the Breeze Cloud Data Manager, through this, we end up getting the practice. Looks a little bit like this. There's a small agent that gets deployed. And then after that, we track it through various screens, being some based on the cloud, some based on-premise, and we end up getting a lot of metrics and data and details about how that thing is performing and being able to do some remote commands and so on. So why did we go with this particular approach? One of the things that Kelly said to me first up was, we'd like to connect all the practices, but we don't really know what networks they're on, and there's certainly no corporate VPN, and they may be on ADSL, we don't know. Some are on dial-up, so what can you do for me? So, there's nothing like a challenge. So, as I mentioned, it's all about the right tool for the right job, okay? And it's not about taking one tool and trying to apply it everywhere. It's about looking at the problem space and saying, what do each of these environments have to offer for me? I can tell you at home, I look at, for example, a stereo system or a TV that I've had for a couple of years, and I'll look at that and go, I didn't know it could do that. So it's all about exploring that tool, right? Exploring it and seeing what it is. So thank you very much, folks. I'm more than happy to go on and give you some more further details about that later on. But in the interest of time, thank you very much. Thanks for listening.